Morning, everybody. I want to thank you, first of all. Thank you, Sander, for inviting me. And I want to thank the U.S. Embassy for paying for me to be here. Estonia, this is my second time to Estonia, and it's always impressive to come here and see the sheer enthusiasm to get involved in technology development and robotic competition. So what I want to talk about today, first of all, a lot of people, you know NASA, but I don't know if you know everything that NASA does. In 1958, NASA was formed, so we're having our 60th birthday this year, which is kind of interesting. Prior to that, NASA was the National Advisory Council for Aeronautics. And so in the 50s, NACA's main job was to build the commercial airline industry, and so we see the fruits of that today. And what NASA's doing now is building the low Earth orbit industry. So in your time frame, you might be going up to the space station and having a holiday over the weekend. So that's something that we're working to help with right now. I have this little movie that I want to play that will kind of maybe highlight some of the other areas that NASA does that you might not be familiar with. So hopefully it'll just play, and we'll see. Yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
So that gives you a little bit of what we do, what we have challenged going forward. And a lot of the things that we do for aeronautics, for space exploration, we develop these technologies for our missions, but a lot of times we will develop technologies that aren't useful. And so instead of just putting them on the shelf, we have this open innovation strategy where we license the technology to anybody who might want to start a business. And so I offer this to you through our techtransfer.nasa.gov website. You can go and see the catalog of about 2,000 or so technologies that you might be useful. You're familiar with us going to the moon. Next year is our 50th anniversary of when we first stepped foot on the moon. When you think about that, it took about 10 years. When I said that NASA started in 1958, it wasn't until 1969 that we actually landed on the moon. But in 1973, we stopped, and we haven't been back since. And so we've done other things. We've developed this International Space Station, a platform that we actually have a lot of international partners, and we have a lab. We have this telescope, the Hubble, you're familiar with. But we're trying to replace the Hubble. with another telescope called James Webb, and that hopefully will be launching in 2021. We do a lot of aeronautics, and this is kind of where my field is. These are some of the robots and things that we're dealing with at Ames Research Center. And Lunar Prospector, although that particular rover has been canceled, the instruments that we use for in situ resource utilization, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's basically going and taking the regolith that we find or the surface material that we find on these planetary bodies, processing it to get the water and the oxygen for fuel for human needs like water. We need radiation protection. And so these are technologies that we're developing today so we can explore. And this gives you an idea of some of the rovers that we dealt with. Curiosity, the big one, is the last big rover we put on. It's about the size of a Volkswagen. You know, it's a 1-ton vehicle. We sent about 200 million miles away. And it's a great science lab. We're actually building another one for 2020 launch. Many of you may have heard that we just landed on Mars just a couple of days ago, and this gives you an idea where these spacecraft are. So you can see InSight is the large one here, and Curiosity, Spirit. You can get an idea. We're always in the equator region, but in the polar regions, we have a lot of ice, and so this is kind of an area that we might want to go to with humans. To give you an idea what InSight is doing, it's actually going to help us understand how rocky planets form. And basically, that little device that just landed is going to drill down about 3 to 5 meters, and it's going to record seismic activity throughout the entire planet, including meteorite impacts, and to get an idea of how rocky planets form. One thing about being here at Robotex, it's really interesting. We love robots. And what I wanted to show you is, you know, most people think of robots as, you know, these robots that have wheels, right? But here's a new technology that we're playing with. It's called a tensegrity system. And so the payload will be in the middle, and yet this thing can actually fold up and be put in a small payload on a rocket, and you can see how manipulative. I mean, we can drop this from hundreds of feet. It can go over the most difficult terrain. And so this is kind of just an open-minded, creative idea. We may or may not use it, but who knows? Maybe somebody might see that as technology that will be useful and can license it. NASA funds a college-level competition. We've encouraged companies like Caterpillar to invest and watch students for 8 months actually compete in the mining competition. They basically, this is how they hire their skilled labor, is by sponsoring these robotic competitions and then watching these incredible students with skills that they want to have working for them. In the process of doing all this, we create lots of spin-offs that actually help people, and it's all around you, even here in Estonia. We affect all of these industries, transportation, public safety, consumer goods, it's all there. To give you an idea what our technologies do, we enhance safety, we save lives, we entertain, we have huge economic impact. Some myths that people think, we did not invent Teflon, we did not invent Velcro, and we did not invent Tang, which everybody kind of thinks. Just to give that out off the table. But we do help with health and medicine. We've had a lot of the monitors for the Apollo astronauts. When you go to the hospital, the heart rate monitors, we actually have this particular pump that we put in a heart. So when people are having heart transplants, this will allow somebody to live 8 or so more hours while they're waiting for a heart to be transplanted. And it's a pump that actually bypasses the heart entirely to provide blood through the body. The only issue is there's no heartbeat. It's kind of a crazy thing to think that they go through, but it's amazing. We save lives with this technology. Many people may have heard of LASIK surgery. The LASIK eye surgery was invented from the James Webb Telescope by making the mirrors perfectly. Because of that, they've actually determined that they can make this wavefront LASIK surgery. So many people are benefiting from that. We have, at Langley, there was, have anybody heard of pacemakers and defibrillators that people have to help them maintain healthy heartbeats? So these leads that go from the actual pacemaker to the heart have special coatings so the body doesn't reject them, because after a number of years you have to change out the device, but you don't have to change out the leads. We do a lot for transportation. If anybody's seen the edges of wings, these little fins on the end of wings, that's a NASA technology that helps the wings stabilize, and so you get less turbulence, and also you save more fuel because the wings are much more stabilized. We help the technology in trucks. If you look at the top of that truck and maybe on the sides and on the bottoms, we make it more aerodynamic, again, saving a lot of fuel and stability. Air traffic control. Everybody flies, and all the air traffic control systems in the entire world, it was a NASA technology that has been implemented and shared. We have lots of partnerships and stuff. So public safety, we've developed materials, special materials for fireproof materials and lubricants to help race car drivers survive in race cars. And here's a rover. Actually, you're probably familiar with this technology here in Estonia. I believe there's a company that uses some of this technology. They'll be demonstrating over at the Robotex Conference. We do water purification technologies. Because of the space station is a closed-loop system, we've had to develop technologies to make the environment in the space station safe. And we can't just necessarily ship things up to the space station. So we have to reuse, recycle, and filter. And so these are technologies that are available to consumers today for safe drinking water. Oh, here's one. This one's one of my favorite. This is a camera on a chip. So does anybody have one of these cell phones? You can best assured that this is all NASA technology in here that you get to use every day. And the interesting thing is when we came up with this idea of a chip on a camera, we were thinking like, what would be the market for this? Who would need this, you know? And so we were thinking, spies would want to use this. This would be like the greatest thing, right? So we'll go out to the spy market and we'll tell them we got this thing, they can take little pictures of stuff. It just so happens it's a really tiny little market. And then a couple of years later, we had no idea who would want it. Nokia, a telephone company, came to us and they said, we think we have a market for this little camera on a chip. We're going to put it on the phone because there's 17-year-old Japanese girls that like to take pictures of all this cute stuff. And so we're like, okay. And it just so happens we're all 17-year-old Japanese girls. We're all taking pictures all the time. But, you know, when you think about this technology never, you know, would have been available before, you know, and we can use this technology for biomedical reasons. We can put all the kind of spectrometers on these cameras. It's quite extraordinary. Special coatings. We have coatings that actually, for the Apollo space astronauts, we didn't want to scratch the actual helmets, so we had to make special coatings to protect those. It's on pretty much every glass surface now, and for iPads and iPhones, but eyeglasses. And also, in this particular frame, we're showing these are special glasses to actually block out certain light wave lengths so that you get clarity as a pilot. Oh, this is a good one too. Speedo actually came to NASA before the Beijing Olympics and said, hey, can you help us make a better swimsuit? And we're like, yeah, sure, I guess so. We realized they had zippers and stuff. So we're like, you know, why don't we just make a swimsuit that you just like put on once? And so all the gold medal, you know, swimmers, they all broke their contracts. They wanted this Speedo swimsuit. And essentially it won every gold medal in the Beijing. Whoever had this swimsuit won a gold medal. And so now the Olympic Committee said it's illegal to use this swimsuit. That what was it, undrugged doping or something, they said. So it's basically never lost, and so it's kind of interesting when we get involved. This is another technology that's interesting that maybe you guys will want this in your home, but in the space station, we wanted to keep plants alive. And when you go to the grocery store and you buy like fruit or flowers and you bring it home and all of a sudden it rots like in 2 days, what's going on? Well, the fruit and everything it's oxidizing. And so we've come up in the space station, we have the same problem, except we want the plants to live longer, but we also want our astronauts to live longer. So we developed this, it's an oxidation filter system that basically cleans the air and also will let your plants and vegetables live longer. So that's kind of a cool thing. You all know about Tempur-Pedic. We all understand where that came from. That was for astronauts, especially Apollo astronauts, because of the G-forces when they launch, they needed a special material that actually would spring back. And so we get to benefit that. Some of us may have that. Many people don't know that the golf ball was also something that NASA had a hand in, and all those little dimples on the outside was actually discovered that at a NASA Ames Research Center, where we do a lot of aerodynamics. That's something that we take for granted. We help with environmental resources. We have all these satellites that basically look down at the Earth. One thing that's interesting, we found in Lake Erie, people were getting really sick. And so when they started looking at the water had this cyanobacteria plume that would come up every once in a while. And so the issue is that by the time they found it in the water filtration systems, it was already too much at a dangerous level. So using some of our satellites, the one thing with the phone has 3 different filters on its cameras. But we have certain satellites that actually will have 12 different filters on those cameras. And so they're able to see these cyanobacteria plumes come before, and we can mitigate that. And that's done all over the world, by the way. So we offer that technology to everybody. There's in India, we want to make sure that a shrimp farmer doesn't lose his crop. We can tell him when his pH is off. And so they know how to mitigate, but they just need to know in time. So NASA is providing technology that doesn't impede, on this villager, this farmer. We don't get in their way, but we give them information that helps them. This is a special controller that basically understands the load, say on these escalators or other types of equipment, where when you have a lot of people on that escalator, it changes the voltage load. And so you need to mitigate and know when you need that load and when you don't. And so because of that, we save lots of energy and power. I'm just going to go a little quicker. Information technology, about computers, cloud computers. A lot of technology was invented at NASA. That allows us, now we can put a cloud computer system in one of these trailers. And the nice thing about these trailers, they're outside, they're getting cooled by the air. So we save a lot of energy by not having these air conditioning systems try to cool these things. And again, this is technology we allow the world to use. The Mars exploration program, we have rovers. It's about 15 minutes to 40 minutes to send a command to Mars. And then you hope that command was executed and that the rover didn't crash into a hazardous either crater or a rock. And so by the time we find out, sometimes it's 45 minutes, it'd be like driving a car where you hit the brakes and you don't know for 45 minutes whether the car stopped. And so we've had to, for many years, we've had to figure out how to, autonomously operate vehicles on other planets. And so that's having a huge effect on self-driving cars. We also have software that we provide that verifies validity of code. And again, we have a huge portfolio of software that companies could look at and possibly implement into their software programs. And this just is a pretty picture that just shows some of the aerosols as they fly. I mean, this is the kind of data that we provide and we give to the world to use. Industrial productivity, I'm just going to rush. If you see this, these tents, that material was invented for spacesuits. And so it's a flexible fiberglass infused fabric. And so, who knew that we could make these giant tents and structures? In fact, the airport in Denver that the whole top of the airport is this material stretch structure. Made in Space is 3D printing. So there's a place at Ames Research Center you can go and basically beam up data, and basically you can send tools, or we're actually working on food. Astronauts want to have pizza, and so they'll be able to 3D print pizza. We have special sensors that you're able to, so firefighters can use. We use this to look down at Earth, and all of a sudden we realize, hey, we can look, if you need to find, if there's a fire and you want to find somebody, or maybe a collapse of a building, we can use this technology to kind of see through and see bodies and try to help these people. So these are sensors that are, there's a whole bunch of sensors. There's actually a guy in Hong Kong that wants to make a toilet that uses one of NASA's sensors to actually evaluate when you poop that if you have cancer or not. It'll be able to tell because there's markers they can tell if you have colon cancer. And hopefully maybe they'll be able to discover more sensors that can do more things like that. So. You can find out a lot more. There's over 2,000 technologies that live around you, like LEDs. That's a NASA technology that we use. So the fact is we use LEDs everywhere, and it's because we needed lightweight, light-emitting diodes on the space shuttle, low power, very bright. We could also get certain UV so we could have plants grow. And so that turned out to be something even more useful here for all these flat screens that we have. And this whole thing is LEDs. This is quite extraordinary. But if you go to nasa.gov city, you'll find out all these technologies that you can implement yourself. And everything is just to make this place a better place for us to live. So with that, I'm at my 0 marker. So if anybody has any questions, like I said, I'm really happy to be here. And yeah, there's a question in the back. I see a hand up there.
I have a question, a clairvoyance question. A lot of our technology is based on explosions. What is your estimation? When can we see sailing ships again in space?
I'm sorry, say what?
Sailing ships.
Sailing ships.
In space.
In space. You mean like, what do you mean by sailing ships?
Solar sail.
Solar sails.
What's the status?
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're working on that. In fact, there was an Estonian CubeSat that was at Ames Research Center. One of the researchers was doing solar sails. It's not my area of expertise, so I'm not actually sure if there's any timeline. But I know that they are doing research actually here in Estonia on the solar cell on a CubeSat. So I believe there's going to be a launch. I was just with someone earlier this morning that said sometime next year, I think they're going to try to launch, and possibly that technology will be on that CubeSat. Which, by the way, is interesting. Here in Estonia, we actually had a student actually working at Ames Research Center in NASA, so it can happen. We have over 650 students a year come to Ames Research Center from all around the world to research and work. And that's only one of 10 centers of NASA across the United States.
Thank you. And I have a second one also about estimation. So everybody knows you faked the moon landing. When can we expect the faking of the Mars landing?
Well, next year is our 50th anniversary of that moon landing, the first one. We went back a couple of times. The one issue we have right now is that we don't have a rocket actually with enough delta V to get us back to the moon. And back in the day when we built the Saturn V, we didn't have computers like we have today. There were a bunch of women doing calculations at desks. They were called the computers. And so it's quite extraordinary what they did. But we are working on it. We are working on having rockets and so large-scale rockets. We're actually helping Elon Musk and Blue Origin. These are two companies in the United States that are trying to build big enough rockets. It's quite a bit of effort to put that kind of weight in the moon. But we're trying to build a gateway that's going to be like a space station that will hang out in a Lagrange point that's just behind, just around the moon. So it'll hang out there and we'll be able to send people it'll be like a lab that we can send people and they can do research on the moon and possibly a gateway to Mars. Going to Mars, there might be maybe the 3rd and 4th grade students of today, they might be the astronaut pool that will be able to go to Mars, but we have yet to see. There's a lot to do before then. And there's a question right here. Oh, and I have stickers for everybody. I have NASA stickers. I'm going to leave them somewhere. I'm not sure where the best place to leave them. Maybe I can put them on a chair in the corner.
Good morning, sir. My question is somewhat different from your talk.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm a professor in an Indian university.
Sure.
I want to ask one question, sir. One inspiring student is from India. He or she want to come to you. He or she is a high school student. What is the path for becoming a scientist or a astronaut with you?
Well, good thing for you is you have a space agency yourself. Israel has a wonderful space agency,
yes,
and so you have probably better luck with them just because you're local. Now, getting a high school student to NASA Ames Research Center is going to be a bit difficult. There's a lot of
If she
challenges.
want to study something, what
Yeah.
you suggest? She should come to US for study, or should study and then come to
Well,
you?
follow your passion. You want the student to really want to know what they want to do.
She's
So it's
having-
either robotics or science.
She's having passion to become a astrophysics scientist
Yeah,
and to be
yeah.
an astronaut.
Well, and that's the perfect thing to do, is to study astrophysics.
Yes.
But there's a lot of places they can study. They can study back home, too. They don't have to come to the U.S. to study that. But there's an application process. And actually, through ISRO, if they become an astronaut, they could fly with the U.S.
She can come for a study in US and thereafter
Absolutely.
she can apply for NASA.
Absolutely. And so there's a website. It's nasa.gov/intern, and they can look up, and there's processes for internationals as well.
We have searched many times your site, sir, for this. One of my students,
Yeah.
I am a university professor, exactly not my student.
Yeah.
She is in school.
I'll give you my card, and we can talk after. So that would be.
Okay, sir.
There's quite a bit of involvement in that. But
Thank you, sir.
sure
Thank
thing.
you.
Hi. You too.
Hello, thank you for a very interesting presentation. I had no idea NASA was involved in so many different fields. I have a question regarding, let's say, all of your Speedo and Nokia example here. So do you give away these IPs, or how do you
They're
continue to
Yeah.
benefit for NASA in business sense also?
Yeah. So NASA is fully funded by public money. And so the licensing that we do collect is actually a very small percentage, but it goes back to the resources for those developers. See, the developers at NASA, they keep their patents. It's their patents. And NASA has legal responsibility to help promote those. But there is a certain, depending on what the technology is, there's a licensing. In the case of Speedo, they basically paid for researcher time to go after that particular task. In some cases, like Nissan, where they're doing self-driving cars, it's the last mile they're having difficulty with as the cars are driving. When it confronts something that has to break the law, the car stops, doesn't know what to do. And so we're trying to help them understand maybe a process or technology to mitigate either a hazard, or that a fleet control manager would be called by the car and they could log in and look around and actually create a path that breaks the rules, if you will, just to temporarily move their car. So those are licensing. If there's software involved where we provide the software, there's licensing. If it's where you need developer time, that's all negotiated, dependent on
So it's like a pool of knowledge that you're selling out?
Yeah, yeah. And so if you go to nasa.gov, well, it's technology transfer at nasa.gov or technologytransfer.nasa.gov. You go there, you'll see our whole portfolio. If you have a company or interest in, maybe it's a nanotechnology, capsule, nanotechnology capsule, and you want to release medicine, you can look at that, say, I have a need for this, and then there's a process where it doesn't matter if you're international or not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All good. All right, thank you very much. In that case, we might leave it there so we can move on. Thank you very much, Joseph.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.